Let's have a word with Claire Bullivant, who is editor of the Conservative Post website. Claire, very good evening to you. Now, obviously a very controversial appointment. What's your view?
Well, good evening, Ian. Yeah, well, we all know Lee Anderson. He is the Red Wall Rottweiler. That's what people call him. He's a big campaigner, a big personality. He sends out big signals, and he's a straight talker though, who gets tough. And I have to say, I popped the question up this evening on social media because to ask the Conservative Post readers what they thought about his views on the death penalty, and the comments are just astounding me. The Conservatives, and actually they're
In
not
a
all
good way?
Conservatives. It's such a good way. They are loving him. I think they're finding it really refreshing that somebody's getting tough and wants to take on the establishment, really, because I think everyone's so fed up with wokery and all that, and it's really cutting through. It's almost refreshing. That's the general. I've even got one Labour supporter actually who's just said, with this kind of talk, I'll be joining Lee and voting Tory at the next election. Labour's gone woke. As a country, we need to get more Lees in government. So, I mean, it's cutting through all parties. It's quite amazing.
Dividing lines are important in politics. We all know that because people do complain that there's a sort of mushy centre. But at the moment, you just wonder whether this is a time when the country needs to be brought back together, that needs to be more united, and maybe appointing someone in this position who does hold like views on the death penalty, which I mean, people. I mean, I think the popularity of the pro-death penalty position, if you look at the opinion polls, has declined as every generation passes. And you just think, well, why? I know he didn't give this interview today, but it was a few days ago, I think. But you think, well, what is the point of trying to revive this debate when it's essentially being put to bed?
I don't think he's tried to revive this. This is the media, isn't it? Picking it up. He said it a few days ago. I think it was an article in The Spectator, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He was asked the question. He just said, "Look, I'm going to be honest. In very, very cases that are extreme, and there's absolutely no shadow of a doubt." I think he quoted Fusilier Lee Rigby, who was actually videoed being murdered. He was saying, in cases like that, the death penalty is a possibility. It wasn't sort of like he's campaigning for it. It was just he was answering a question. But I mean, it is refreshing to hear our MPs sort of going against the narrative. At the moment, everyone wants to be so woke and so politically correct on everything. And every day on the Conservative Post, I'm just having messages constantly from my readers who are just hating it. They want their MPs to start speaking, what the man in the street's thinking. And Lee certainly does that. I mean, he did it. You've mentioned it before about not kneeling for the footballers. He's spoken out about the strikes. He's very critical about anything EDI, the equality, diversity, extremes. He's quite fair. And he's also really trying to crack down on the illegal migrants. And that's what speaks to the man in the street.
But that there is an imperative, though, when you hold a senior position, whether you're a formal member of the government or not, if you're deputy chairman of the party, that does mean that you have to have a bit of a brake mechanism in your head, and you can't just come out with the first thing that occurs to you. Isn't this actually going to could it not neuter Lee Anderson in a way, and where after a few weeks he thinks, well, I don't want to say things I don't believe, and I mean, is he really going to last the course?
Well, I think the membership, at least, and the grassroots were very, very disappointed. I mean, we ran a petition on the Conservative Post trying to get them to have the vote to obviously vote for the Boris back in the day last summer, get him back on the ballot. And then we ran another one they wanted a vote on their choice of chairman. I have to say, actually, Lee was up there quite surprisingly. He was, I think, number 5 or something on the list of who they wanted as their chairman. Obviously, Rishi chose Greg, who I have to say is absolutely amazing. Greg Hans is a superstar. He deserves a lot more credit actually than he gets, but he's a very safe pair of hands, and I think Greg will be great. But I feel like Lee is really cutting through to the members and the grassroots. And that's what the party really needs to do, because they've lost a lot of members,
Well,
or members are feeling very disenfranchised.
yeah, and obviously party members, whatever the party is, they need to feel enthused about the party, and I can see him performing an interesting role on that. But there is a public-facing role here, isn't there, on the media? And you know as well as I do that when he goes on to do interviews on various programmes, it'll be predominantly, well, Mr. Anderson, you said this on February the 3rd, 1933 or whatever. I don't know why I said 1933. And that's going to be a problem for him, isn't it? Because he will have a message that he wants to deliver, but a lot of interviewers won't be interested in letting him deliver it.
I know. Well, this is a problem I actually think we do have with our media at the moment. I feel like it's very one-sided. I actually set up the Conservative Post. Before I came back to England, I was living in America for the last 14 years. And I came back and I couldn't believe how sort of biased the British press had got. So that's why I ended up setting up the Conservative Post and sort of being a voice and sticking up for the Conservative MPs who were having their words twisted and were constantly being picked on by the media, or not having their good news stories being shared. But I think someone like Lee, I think a lot of MPs can't deal with it very well, but I actually think someone like Lee Anderson is very good. If you've heard him in interviews, he's salt of the earth, but he's charming and he's a great character, and I think he can take them on. He definitely can bite back. He's not one to shy away from.
He certainly can. Just one final question. If you've been living in America for the last, did you say 14 years?
14 years.
You will have seen what's happened to the Republican Party, where it's declined from being a political party to almost a quasi-religious sect and being taken over by some fairly unpleasant individuals who I do not describe as conservatives in the traditional sense. Do you not fear that the same thing could be on the verge of happening here?
I tell you what, I was in California for 14 years and I saw what the socialists have done to California. So I've come back more determined than ever to not let Starmer and his socialist gang get the keys to number 10. It happens very quickly. As soon as Gavin Newsom and his crew over in California got the keys over there.
He's a Democratic governor.
Yeah, it happens almost overnight. They legalized sort of drugs on the street, and the crime went up, and the taxes went up, and all the small businesses closed, and the services stopped working. And it's not reported about on the TV over here, but there are literally tents and shantytown cities over in California now. It's absolutely dreadful. And even 7-8 years ago, downtown LA was very, very safe. They'd really cleared up. So I mean, my biggest threat is socialism coming to Britain.
Yeah, but that's not what I asked you about, the Republican Party. We don't want the Conservative Party changed into a version of the Tea Party, do we?
We don't, but the alternative is a lot scarier to me. That's what I was trying to say, and that's how I was trying to answer.
OK, Claire, thank you very much. That's Claire Bullivant, editor of the Conservative Post. I think she got more plugs in for the Conservative Post in that than I think any other guest I've ever